This is your economic review. Analysts in the country are now predicting that your power bill could jump up by 16% this year as power costing per unit continues to vary in the country. Last year, Kenya Power opened talks with the energy regulator to increase electricity prices by up to a fifth after the state softened its earlier stand against higher tariffs. Now, the Energy Ministry is understood to have made a U-turn and is now in agreement that Kenya Power needs more cash to cover the cost of buying wholesale electricity from generators such as KenGen and maintenance of the national grid. Now, the move was informed by Kenya Power's need for more cash to cover the cost of buying electricity from generators such as KenGen and maintenance of the national grid, and did not seemingly bear fruit even as the power provider has put in plans to start a solar business to supply power to private homes and bigger industrialists who make up 54% of their total revenue. However, a critical analysis of the monthly pricing of the power provider now indicates that they may have found a way to have their way when it comes to the amount of money that users have to pay for power. Wow, this morning, let's invite Tim Kipchumba, who's financial analyst and an economic analyst as well, who's going to tell us exactly what has been their analysis of the pricing model that Kenya Power is running with right now. Tim, good morning, sir.
Morning to you, Simba. How are you?
Fine, thank you. All good. Can you break down that analysis for us, Tim, so we understand? Because what we do know is that the 20% increase has not been granted yet, but your analysis says what, Tim?
So, it's not really my analysis. There are several independent studies already available in the country.
Yes.
That show that power prices are likely to rise by 69% over the next 7 years.
Yes.
So that by 2024, prices will have risen by close to 70%.
Yes.
And we're beginning to see that now. 2 days ago, there's already announcement that power prices has risen by 16%. And if you bought tokens this morning, I bought tokens, and for 1,500 units, you can only get 64. For 1,500 shillings, you can only get 64 units. That's already about 24 shillings per unit of power that you purchase from KPLC. It's very high. Just to give context to our viewers.
Yes.
That is twice the cost of power in United States. And it's very significant. It's so significant because now Kenya is the most expensive source of power in the region, which means that we are unlikely to be competitive as industry. We are unlikely to be competitive as manufacturing. And if you consider the fact that that is likely to rise up to 27, 28, mostly because of one thing, they call it capacity charges or deemed charges. So
yes.
Capacity charges is, we predicated bringing power plants onto the line, assuming that we would have a certain level of growth as projected in Vision 2030. But of course, some of those projects for Vision 2030 have not come online, which means that our economy has not kept pace. Okay, so the challenges over the last 3-4 years have slowed down income per capita, have slowed down production, and therefore energy consumption. And so, even though their power plants are now ready, those people, the investors of those power plants, still need to be paid in order, because they already made the investment, they already have an IPP in place. And so the least cost development power plant did not consider the impact of deemed charges, because it's one, if you have Lake Victoria already ready and you are not ready to evacuate the power or take the power in order to use it, of course that costs money. And so, it's an opportunity for many industries now who form a bulk of KPLC consumers to really think alternatives, whether it's cogeneration, whether it's solar, especially because many people have roofs. And I foresee that this is also part of KPLC strategy to try to show up the losses that have happened in the last 2-3 years.
Yes. Tim, just let's go back, and I don't know whether you have access to that table that we got from your feed just the other day when we were analyzing. It is exactly what we have on air right now. And I'll go back to what you have as September electricity bill extract. The first part is method of charge, and the second one is small commercial method, SCZ, all the way to that one that has a total figure of 347,705 shillings in the total monthly bill. Tim, do you have access to that?
I can get access to that. So
can you get access to that, Tim, so that we break it down so you can actually show us where your concern is coming from? It's actually on your feed, on your Twitter feed. I think you can actually get it this morning so we can have a look at it together.
Perfect.
Yes, all right. As the one that has a total bill of 347,705 shillings as the total monthly bill that was charged in the month of September for that specific business.
So, I mean, I think in summary, what that really says, Simba,
yes.
Is that about 40%, maybe 30 to 40% of costs that Kenya Power charges in their power bill,
yes, is
attributed to several levies, whether it's forex levy, whether it's fuel levy, whether it's so there is a pass-through cost. To be fair to KPLC.
Tim, let me go through it. Let me just go through it because I have it right now. I'm sorry to cut you short there. Now, this is exactly what we have. If you look at the billing concept that we have there, let's talk about the billing concept. So they're saying when you look at what they've taken out, forex exchange, it's gone. Inflation adjustment, it's gone. ERC levy, it's gone. REP levy, it's gone. Warma levy, it's gone. Total levies and adjustment. Out of somebody who spent 282, somebody who spent 233,391 and 60 cents as the total consumption. That is plain without any levy, team. If you put together all those levies up to VAT, then this person pays 347,705 as the total cost. Look at that difference from 391 to 347,705 as the total cost. Is that where the conversation point is, Tim?
So that's part of the conversation. That is part of the conversation. So what we are really saying is that if you consume 233,000, like in the case of that specific consumer,
yes,
you don't really pay 233,000. You pay 347. Then the reason is that government finds a way to collect, foreign exchange, whatever inflation adjustment, ERC levy, rural electrification levy, WARMA levy, which is a water regulatory authority levy. So so you end up with levies accounting to about 30% of your electricity bill.
Yes.
But what we are now discussing is not that. We are discussing the fact that the price per unit,
yes,
will go up potentially so there will be an additional charge that is not factored in there, which is called deemed charges or capacity charges.
Yes.
And I don't know how transparent KPLC or the industry regulator will try to push this, but we will now see that over the next couple of months, that consolidated power bill will go up, either because there is an additional levy that KPLC is forced to recover from consumers in order to send it to those people that generated the power plant, or by just increasing the cost of unit consumption per unit. But what's interesting, what you don't see in that bill, Simba,
yes,
is that KPLC pays about 7 shillings per unit to KenGen. roughly, about 7 shillings per unit to Kenyan. But then they pay another 30% on top of that to in these taxes and levies. So there is also a significant conversation about how come KPLC, how come costs to KPLC might be something like 8.5 shillings per unit, but they end up selling to consumers at 24 shillings per unit. You know, that's because one thing is the levies that KPLC is forced to charge, but the other one is the efficiency of KPLC. Because what you just see there is the levies, but then inside that cost of per unit cost of 233,000, that cost is already double what they get a power at from Kenja or from any other independent power producer.
Yes.
So so it's a conversation. Both government should government really be levying that much taxes to make the country decent competitive? Because right now Ethiopia is selling power to us. Ugandan power is more cheaper. Tanzanian power is more cheaper. And so our exports will become less competitive. Industry will become less competitive. We will likely lose more jobs just because of the cost of energy for the country.
Yes. Tim, let's clear it like this, because I know you want to rush somewhere this morning, and you can just take 2 minutes therefore. So how do you therefore sort of synthesize the announcement from KPLC that they want to get into power because they want to hold on to the 54% of the revenue that is coming from the bigger industrialists, while in the leading pack of those people want to move out of the power providers and national grids? Is it because that they have to charge for this levies? Because at the end of the day, therefore, then why are you getting into solar business? Is it that you are at a position now because you're producing more than can be bought and consumed in the country, which is why you're charging this much?
Absolutely. I don't think, first, to answer your question, I think KPLC has no choice but to consider solar. I don't think they have no choice.
Yes.
But the business case, I agree with you, the business case is because if they could find ways not to have to charge the heavy large consumers, which form a bulk of their customer base,
yes,
those levies, because they are now doing solar, and so the business case is truly from those levies. If they can avoid those levies somehow, knowing our government, they will most likely tax solar, which God forbid. But if they could avoid those levies, power will be competitive. Power will go down by at least 30%. We already know that.
Yes.
But then those regulators, I mean, the government cannot afford not to charge those levies, because those levies are, they are now in law. They have authorities that rely on those as sources of revenue. And so, yes, I agree with you that what KPLC is trying to do is that they already see what is happening to utility companies like in South Africa, Eskom, where they ignored solar for a while, and the country is done exceedingly well in adopting solar. I mean, South Africa now, last year, did 100 megawatt of solar. It's a lot of solar. It's more solar than we have done, except last year. It's half the solar that we have ever done in the country. Let's put it that way. But they've done more than 1.5 gigawatt of solar. It's a lot of solar.
Yes.
And what that means is that KPLC already recognizes anyone with a roof, anyone with a power bill like the one you just saw, can already see that they can save as much as 10 shillings per unit for the people that are, paying right now 23, 24 shillings. For the people that are paying 15 shillings, which is mostly industries and commerce and whatever, they will probably save another 5 shillings per unit. This is significant money, because the average consolidated price per unit in Kenya today is about 15 shillings for the large consumers. So if you can save even 3 shillings or 4 shillings, it's significant money. And so, yes, I give them credit. They are thinking in the right direction. But I just hope that the regulation will not then, force taxation on solar, because we would be one of the few countries around the world that will be taxing solar.
Pretty much. Tim Kipchumba, investment analyst, thank you very much for taking your time this morning to speak to us here at Metropole Television. We wish you a good day, sir. All right, let's cross over to the next issue that we have for you this morning. And at this point, I'm going to introduce Gabriel Mwendwa, who is an investment associate of Horizon Africa Capital, and Chacha Bichang'a, personal finance coach and economic analyst. Now, the new financial year 2021-2022 will see government debt repayment of public debt cross the 1 trillion mark from July, further underlying what has been a struggle by the Treasury Office to bring it down public expenditure. Now, the Treasury, in the Budget Policy Statement 2021-2022, plans to spend 1.023 trillion shillings for loans repayment starting July, making it the single biggest expenditure for the government in what will be a huge jump from the 435.7 billion shillings that taxpayers paid for debt 4 years ago. Now, the repayment of principal sums of a majority of the commercial and semi-concessional loans will fall due in the period, with the effects of the coronavirus pandemic already pushing the government into more borrowing to fix its budget issues, with the tax one already missing on collection targets. Analysts already predict that Kenya's total debt will jump to 8.59 trillion in the year ending June 2022, with several local and international agencies, including the IMF and World Bank, expressing concern over Kenya's rising appetite for borrowing to finance state expenditure. Let me bring in you, Chacha, this morning. Now, with 5 shillings of the government's collection out of 10 shillings already projected to go into repayment of debt, what would this mean for development expenditure, Chacha?
Thank you, Simba, for that incisive question. First, before we go to that, we'd like to look at how did we get into this situation of huge debts. Remember, actually, as you have said, the government revenue, which includes now sourcing from external sources, went into repayment of debt to the tune of over 1 trillion shillings. Remember these debts, okay, let's begin from 2014, June, when the government went for a Eurobond loan of 280 billion shillings. And that was to be paid in 5 and 10-year tranches. Second was in 2018, when the government took 202 billion shillings to be paid in 10 and 30-year tranches. The third one was in 2019, when the government took around 260 billion shillings. Total debt for those years now amounts to 692 billion shillings. So when you look at that, and when you look at what we collected, for example, last year, due to the effect of COVID-19 pandemic, the government had a shortfall in revenue collection. Yes. Because it was able to collect only 166 billion shillings against a budget of 1.8 trillion shillings. So you look at there, we have a deficit of over 800 billion shillings, meaning that now from our sources, internal sources, the government does not collect enough. It is in a vicious cycle of repaying debts, meaning that money for development expenditure wouldn't be there. If you are paying over 90% of the revenue or from the debts, the loans you get from the donor agencies, you use actually over 90% to pay debt. Then what is left now for development expenditure? Nothing. It means the government is living beyond her means. It means that the government needs to institute economic policy measures. As you have said, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank have issued what we call a debt service suspension initiative, what they call as DSSI, debt service suspension initiative, to control the borrowing appetite of African countries like Kenya. And this has come with a raft of measures, one of them being adjusting the tax payment, meaning that now the tax bracket is being widened. By the way, the IMF representatives who are here in December last year, they already have appreciated that now the government has widened the tax bracket from now 4 bands to 3 bands. Now Kenyans are paying more in terms of taxes. What does that mean for the economy? It means Kenyans, majority of the households, business enterprises, small scale business owners have low liquidity. A lot of money is being taxed, lowering the cash flow which would have been used in doing a business. So this borrowing appetite must be controlled. Thank you.
Pretty much. All right, let me bring in Gabriela Mwendwa, Investment Associate, Horizon Africa Capital. Gabriel, I mean, wow. The conversation from the Treasury Office is that while our debt levels are sustainable, now Kenya has already negotiated for debt relief on a lot of facilities that the country was repaying into the COVID-19 era, some of which became active during the period under review. Now, technically, Gabriel, we have already defaulted because, yes, we negotiated for a debt repayment relief when we were supposed to pay for it. Well, are we likely, therefore, Gabriel, owing to the fact that now our debt repayment for the very first time has crossed the 1 trillion mark, are we likely to see the country default on some of its repayments in the financial year 2021-2022, owing to the fact that we are also talking about how we are uncertain about how the economy is going to perform again in 2021 or 2022?
Thank you for that, and thank you for having me, Simba. I think there's one thing I'd like to put into context, and is this figure of 1 trillion, what does it include? So the 1 trillion figure includes both principal and interest payments.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Now, naturally, or, you know, in normal circumstances, what all governments do, they normally get more debt to pay the principal part. So what I'm saying is that the government of Kenya will actually not be paying out 1 trillion shillings, because assuming 400 billion is interest, 600 billion is principal, what will happen is that they have to pay the 400 billion from our tax collections.
Yes.
But the 600 billion, they can go to the same person who they are paying and ask for a fresh loan. So that's really what, how the government has managed to do this over time. Now, what this means for us is that we are never going to reduce our debt. It's going to continue increasing, because if you're never paying the principal amount, you're just borrowing to repay it, then technically you're increasing your overall and total leverage that you have. So yes, and as Chacha has put it, we're in a problem, because you see the 600 billion refers to development or expenditure you made last year.
Yes.
You still have to finance this year's borrowing, which he has rightly put at 800 billion. So what happens in the next fiscal year? It means you're increasing your borrowing every year by at least 800 billion while not repaying whatever you owe historically. So we are going to continue seeing an upward trend in our debt, and at some point we're not going to be able to cover it, even the interest portion, because currently and even by law, the interest portion is not supposed to be more than 30% of the total tax revenues collected.
Yes.
So currently they are able to sort of manage it at that level, but at some point that's not going to be able, we're not going to be able to do that. And that's why you can see they need to go back to parliament and start talking about lifting the debt ceilings, because they are not reducing our debt amount. They're just continuously aggregating it. And like we said, this term of sustainable, etc., we all know from the basic person who runs a household, you don't need complicated mathematics to tell when debt is not sustainable. So the debt taken on by the Kenyan government is not sustainable. And the solutions proposed by the IMF, I dare say, are very inappropriate in our case.
I'll be coming to those solutions. Good. Now, Chacha, because the question now for, at the end of the day, gentlemen, is got to be, well, what can be done there for locally to stop the ballooning debt levels in the country? Chacha, let's talk about what was proposed just the other day as we get into 2021-2022. Now, Chacha, this is what they're saying, that they want to introduce under the regulation 206 Cap 1 of the Public Finance Management Act, something that they're calling the sinking fund. Good. That's fine. And this is what they're saying, that this is going to allow for the country to locally contribute to a certain kitty that is going to allow for us to repay these loans through our own funds when and how they mature. Good. Which therefore begs me to look at exactly who are the current holders when it comes to domestic debt, because if you're saying that's what we're going to get it from, let's look at who that is, and we're going to see that banking institutions account for more than 50% of the government domestic debt, because that's what they get it from, which if you can actually just give me that data now will be quite appropriate so we can look at it. And when you look at pension funds that also account for 30% of that debt, Chacha, which therefore begs the question, Chacha, you're saying, well, government collections are dwindling. You're also saying that, well, our debt levels right now, they're quite unsustainable. So where is this money that's going to go into the sinking fund going to come from, Chacha?
Yeah, thank you, Simba, for that good question. This proposal of the government wanting to create a sinking fund, it is actually good at face value. But when you dig deeper into the economic indicators
yes.
on whether the government is able to source internally or domestically the money that we can partly be used maybe to pay debt and also run the infrastructure expenses, recurrent expenses, and so on. So as we have said already, with this vicious circle of the ballooning debt, the government is in a catch-22. In as much as it is proposing a sinking fund, this may be good, but it may not be helpful in the long run. As my brother Gabriel has put it here, when you fail to manage your debt, you will not able to sustain any meaningful economic growth. Because we are talking of vicious debt here, whereby the secretary was reported recently saying that the government has no problem with repaying debt. Why? Because they are going for what we call a rollover strategy. A rollover strategy is an agreement that the government enters with the lender, acquire another loan to repay the principal of the loan that is now maturing.
Yes.
And what about the interest? Interest remained, it means the taxpayers will actually have to pay that. That this rollover strategy comes with another risk. It comes with the rollover high interest rates, meaning that as the weighted bill, as the debts are increasing, the interest rates are increasing as we go for more loans. So this sinking fund, will it be enough? And where is it coming from? If, as you have said, 50% of the domestic borrowing is from the banks, and therefore it means the government is actually dead broke. And it is better now we learn how to exercise fiscal financial discipline. As IMF actually proposed here, it proposed a raft of measures including freezing employment, putting more civil servants on contracts, which is also detrimental to the economy, detrimental to the common man. Because if civil servants are put on contract, well, the government is saving on pension, it is saving on the high salaries it's paying, but what about now the employees themselves? They will suffer. As you have had already, we have had civil servants going on strike. Nurses were on strike just the other day, and even doctors. And wait a bit, teachers also may go on strike. Lecturers would also follow suit because, for that matter, lecturers were awarded a court order to be paid 13.8 billion shillings, and the government paid only 8.2 billion. That is 7.6 billion shillings pending, meaning the government is not able to run the economy well. And it's better we follow the monetary fiscal discipline, whereby we reduce wastage, we reduce our spending, and increase sources of generating more money. Because that is what actually, even at personal level, you can't continue borrowing for consumption. You only borrow for investment. And whatever you borrow should be able to repay itself. Thank you, Simba.
Pretty much, Gabriel. Once we come back, I'm going to put the same question to you, because the question is, wow, a noble suggestion now from the Treasury that they need to come up with a sinking fund that is going to be funded locally and domestically, so we can repay some of this interest once they accrue instead of borrowing. But then, where is this money going to come from? If all we're doing right now is borrowing and we're crying foul of the targets that are getting missed by the taxman. Once we come back here on the Metropole's Business and M Show this morning.